The colony playground was full of voices, bouncing balls and loud laughter, but one small corner stayed quiet, a shadow where no joy reached. There sat a little alien girl, her legs folded close to her chest, her left leg covered with a heavy metal brace. Other children were running across the dusty ground kicking a ball, their shouts echoing between the buildings. The ball rolled too far sometimes, bouncing close to where the girl sat. Every time the children came to fetch it, they glanced at her quickly and then looked away. No one asked her to join. No one slowed down. She tried to smile once, a small, weak smile, when the ball rolled close to her feet. But one boy just grabbed it and ran off without a word. Her smile vanished before it even reached her eyes. The girl's small hands pressed against the brace on her leg. She whispered almost to herself, "Sorry, sir. I can't play ball." Her voice cracked like dry wood, empty of hope. Not far away, standing beside an old repair cart, a man paused. He had grease on his clothes. His hands were stained with oil. His name was Jack, a mechanic who fixed broken machines for a living. He had stopped here only to rest his back, but those words cut through him sharper than a blade. Jack's eyes followed the little girl, her thin frame, her pale skin that glowed faintly under the twin suns. Her eyes were bright but heavy with sadness. She was different from the other alien children, not only because of her brace, but because of the way she carried herself, like someone already defeated. Jack frowned. He remembered his own younger years, how he had once broken his arm and been left aside by other kids. They had laughed. They had said he was too slow, too weak. He had carried that sting for years, and now, hearing those same words in her voice, it twisted something inside him. The ball rolled too far again, bouncing close to the girl's corner. This time, she didn't even try to smile. She turned her face away, hoping no one noticed the tears in her eyes. Jack bent down, picked up the ball before the children could. He held it in his large, rough hands, then walked over slowly to where the girl sat. She looked up quickly, surprised, her eyes wide. She seemed afraid he would scold her or tell her to move. Instead, Jack knelt down, placed the ball gently in front of her. "Looks like they left you out," Jack said softly, his voice calm, his tone gentle. The girl shook her head, her small fingers tightening around the metal brace. "No, sir, I can't play my leg. It doesn't work right," she whispered, her voice breaking again. Jack studied her, the way her shoulders hunched, the way she didn't dare meet his eyes. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. The other children shouted, calling for the ball. Jack stood, gave the ball a small kick toward them. They cheered and ran back into their game, never sparing the girl another glance. Jack stayed where he was, his eyes still on her. She sat silently, staring at the ground, trying not to cry. The suns began to lower in the sky, painting the colony buildings in gold. The playground slowly emptied as parents called their children home. Soon the laughter and noise faded, leaving only the quiet figure of the girl still in her corner. Jack lingered, leaning against his cart, his mind spinning. He didn't even know her name, but he couldn't shake her voice from his head. "Sorry, sir, I can't play ball," the words echoed in him. He watched her struggle to stand, leaning on the brace, moving slowly, every step heavy, every step painful, her small form limping away toward the narrow streets of the colony. Jack's jaw tightened, his mechanic's hands curled into fists. He hated broken things being thrown away. He hated when people decided something was useless and stopped trying to fix it. He fixed machines. Yes, but maybe he could fix more than that. The night winds began to rise, carrying dust across the ground. Jack climbed into his old cart, started the engine. The machine rumbled, but his eyes still followed the path where the girl had disappeared. Told himself to forget, to let it go. But his heart refused. Her quiet, broken words stayed with him, refusing to fade. Jack pressed his foot down, the cart rolling slowly back toward his workshop. Inside his mind, an idea sparked, faint but alive. The colony stars shone above, and somewhere in the shadows of those narrow streets, the alien girl walked alone, unaware that the human mechanic, who had heard her words, now carried a plan that could change everything. Jack's workshop stood on the edge of the colony, a forgotten place where few ever bothered to go. Its roof sagged under years of dust, and the walls were patched, with metal sheets of different colors inside, however. The place lived with the hum of machines, the sharp scent of oil and the glow of half-finished projects scattered everywhere. Jack pushed open the heavy door that night, the memory of the alien girl still haunting him. Her voice played again and again in his mind. "Sorry, sir. I can't. Play ball?" It wasn't just sadness he felt, it was anger too. Anger at a world that let children sit broken while others laughed. He set down his bag, rubbed his hands together, and stared at the old table in the corner, piled high with sketches and scraps. Among them was something he had once tried to build long ago, a mechanical frame, a half-complete design of moving legs powered by small energy cells. He had abandoned it years back, saying it was too complicated, too costly, but tonight his eyes saw it differently. He pulled the papers closer, brushing off the dust. The lines on the sketches seemed alive now, the gears and joints whispering to him. The plan returned to his mind clearer than ever. He could make something for her, not just a toy, but a way to stand, a way to run. The old workbench creaked under his weight as he sat down. He lit a small lamp, shadows stretched across the room. His hands reached for tools without thinking. The sound of a wrench echoed. Then the hiss of welding. Sparks lit the air. He remembered his own pain as a boy. The day his arm had been broken in an accident. The way people had looked at him like he was weak, useless. He had hated that feeling, hated being left behind. Now he imagined her face, the way her smile had died before it could even form, and he knew he couldn't let it stay that way. Jack worked deep into the night, each strike of the hammer fueled by quiet determination. His eyes burned, but he didn't stop. He pieced together parts scavenged from broken drones, unused exosuits, and discarded mining tools. Slowly, piece by piece, something began to take shape on the table. The sound of footsteps outside broke his focus for a moment. Voices drifted in from the street. 2 colony workers walked past, laughing, their words clear. "Did you see that cripple kid at the playground again?" One sneered. "Yeah, what a waste, no wonder nobody wants her around." The other chuckled. Jack froze, his jaw tight, his hand clenched around the wrench until his knuckles went white. He wanted to storm out, shout at them, but he forced himself to stay silent. Their cruelty only fed the fire inside him. When the voices faded, Jack turned back to his project. Welding faster, his teeth gritted. He would show them all. He would show her most of all, that she wasn't broken. Hours passed, the workshop filled with the hum of energy cells, the smell of heated metal, and the flicker of sparks against the walls outside. The moon shifted in the sky. Silence filled the colony. But Jack kept moving, his heart refusing to rest. At last, when his arms ached and sweat dripped down his brow, he stepped back. On the table stood a crude frame, a skeleton of metal with glowing joints, not perfect, not finished, but alive with promise. It looked like a pair of legs, shaped for someone smaller, lighter. Jack ran his hand over the cool metal, imagining the girl's small feet fitting inside. He whispered under his breath, "Not useless, not anymore." But doubt crept in quickly. What if it didn't work? What if she was too scared to try? What if the colony elders forbade it? He shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. No. He had built machines that carried miners through firestorms, that kept engines alive in vacuum. He could do this. In the corner of the workshop, an old holoscreen flickered to life as he brushed past. Its light revealed a picture hidden under dust. Jack as a younger man, standing with his father, both of them smiling beside a small robot they had built together. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Machines break, Jack, but they can be fixed. Never give up on what can still move." Jack closed his eyes, gripping the frame tight. He felt that same lesson now, but this time it wasn't about a machine. It was about a child, a girl who deserved more than whispers and pity. He worked until his eyelids grew heavy, finally collapsing into his chair, the frame glowing faintly beside him, unfinished but full of hope. The workshop was silent except for the soft hum of power still running through the metal joints. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the colony skies. The streets began to stir, but inside the hidden workshop, a plan had already taken root. a plan forged from steel and fire, and in the heart of a mechanic who refused to let a little girl believe she could never play again. The next day, the colony's market buzzed with life. Stalls lined the streets, filled with bright fabrics, steaming food, and the steady hum of traders calling out prices. Alien families moved in groups, their voices soft but watchful. The colony was never loud, not in the way human towns were. It was orderly, quiet, and full of eyes that judged everything. Jack walked through the crowd, his boots heavy on the stone road. He had grease on his sleeves and tired shadows under his eyes. He hadn't slept after working all night in his workshop, but his mind was fixed on one thought: the girl. He found her near the food stalls, standing beside an older alien couple. Their skin the same pale shade as hers, their expressions sharp and serious. She clung to the woman's arm, her eyes downcast as if afraid to meet anyone's gaze. The metal brace on her leg gleamed in the sunlight, a reminder to all of what she lacked. Jack hesitated, then stepped forward, his voice steady. "Morning," he said, nodding politely to the guardians. "I saw your girl at the playground yesterday." The woman's eyes narrowed, her voice firm and distant. "She is not my girl, human, she is my sister's child," she corrected coldly. "And you should not speak to her." The man beside her folded his arms, his gaze cutting like glass. "She has enough shame already. Don't add more." The girl's small fingers gripped the woman's sleeve tighter, her head lowering further. Jack frowned. "She isn't shame. She's just a child," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "Children should play, not sit in corners, while others laugh." The man stepped forward, his voice low but filled with warning. "You don't understand our ways, human. She was born weak, broken. She cannot be fixed. Our people do not waste time on the weak." The words struck Jack. Like a hammer, his jaw clenched. "Not worth fixing?" he repeated, his voice shaking with anger. "I've fixed engines melted by fire, drones shattered by storms. I've fixed machines others gave up on. Don't tell me a child is less than that." Gasps rose from nearby stalls. Heads turned. Alien faces leaned closer. Whispers began to spread through the crowd. Humans were tolerated in the colony but rarely trusted. And here was Jack, raising his voice against one of their elders. The woman pulled the girl closer, her tone icy. "Keep away from her, mechanic. You don't know the burden you invite," she said, then turned sharply, guiding the girl away through the crowd. The man followed, casting one last glare at Jack before disappearing. The girl glanced back only once, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of fear and something else. Hope, faint and trembling like a candle. Jack stood frozen, the stares of the market heavy on his back. Some were curious, others angry, but most were cold. "Humans should not meddle," someone whispered. "Always fixing things that should be left broken," another muttered. Jack turned slowly, his eyes sweeping the faces. He saw nothing but distance, no kindness, no compassion, just the same wall of cold stares. He walked away, his steps heavy, the crowd parting with silence as he passed. The weight of their eyes pressed on him like iron, but deep inside, his anger burned hotter. He didn't care about their stares. He didn't care about their whispers. He cared about the girl who had been left behind. Back at his workshop, Jack slammed the door shut. The sound echoed against the walls. He sat heavily on his chair, rubbing his face with his hands. He had tried to speak, tried to reason, but the colony's pride was stronger than reason. He looked at the half-finished frame lying on his workbench, its metal joints still glowing faintly from the night before. He ran, his hand along it slowly, whispering, "They don't believe, but she will." That night, the girl lay awake in a small corner of her guardian's home. She heard their whispers when they thought she was asleep. "She will bring us nothing but shame," the man's voice said. "She will never stand with the others." The woman answered. The girl's small hands pressed against the blanket, her heart aching. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, she remembered the human's face in the market, the fire in his eyes when he had spoken for her. No one had ever spoken like that, not for her. She closed her eyes, whispering into the dark. Why would he care? But deep inside, for the first time in her life, she felt a tiny seed of belief. Meanwhile, Jack sat awake, sketching improvements on the frame, his tools clinking in the silence of the night. The cold stares of the colony still burned in his memory, but so did the girl's glance back, that spark of hope. He tightened a bolt, his jaw firm. "They'll see," he muttered. "She'll walk, she'll run, and she'll play ball, whether they believe or not." And as the colony slept, under the twin moons, a quiet war had already begun, not with weapons but with steel, fire, and the determination of one mechanic who refused to look away. Jack's workshop smelled of metal and smoke, the kind of scent that clung to the air and settled into clothes. Outside, the colony had grown quiet, streets empty, lanterns glowing faintly in the night wind. But inside the workshop it was alive. Tools clattered, welding sparks danced, and the steady hum of a power cell filled the space. Jack stood hunched over the workbench, sweat dripping down his brow, his eyes fixed on the small mechanical frame. He had started. It was no longer just a skeleton of metal. It was beginning to look alive. Cables stretched across its joints, thin energy lines pulsed with soft blue light. Tiny gears whispered as they turned. He adjusted a bolt, sparks flew, the sound sharp in the silence. He didn't flinch. His hands were steady, his mind sharper than it had been in years. Every piece he added, every wire he tightened carried the same thought. She deserves this. But doubt crept in with every hum of the power cell. What if it fails? What if she falls? What if she's too afraid to even try? Jack shook his head, tightening another joint. Failure was not an option, not this time. The workshop's walls were lined with old projects, broken drones, half-finished tools, and scraps of machines the colony had thrown away. Jack had always collected what others abandoned, but tonight was different. Tonight he wasn't fixing for money. He was building for something far more important. Hope. The silence broke when a sudden knock echoed against the workshop door. Jack froze, his hands pausing midair. He rarely had visitors at night. Slowly he wiped his hands and opened the door a crack. Outside stood a boy, one of the human kids from the colony, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What are you building?" "Jack?" he asked, peering into the workshop. Jack stepped outside quickly, blocking the view, his voice low but firm. "Nothing you need to know, get home." The boy frowned but didn't argue. He ran off into the dark streets. Jack watched until he vanished, then closed the door tight, bolting it. If the colony discovered what he was doing, they would shut him down before he even had a chance. He turned back to the frame, his jaw set, his eyes burning with determination. "They won't stop me," he whispered. "Not this time." He pulled out an old data chip from a drawer, slipping it into the hollow screen. Glowing blue diagrams filled the air. His father's old blueprints, designs for exosuits meant for heavy mining. Jack had studied them when he was younger, dreaming of building his own machines. Now he took those same designs and began to alter them, shrinking them down, reshaping them for a child's frame. Hours passed, the workshop alive with light and sound. Welding sparks lit the walls, shadows danced, and the mechanical frame began to change. Its joints smoother, its shape more fitting, almost like a second pair of legs waiting to be worn. Jack leaned back finally, his arms aching. He looked at what he had made so far. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't beautiful, but it was strong. It could carry her weight. It could give her a chance. He imagined her small hands gripping the sides, her eyes wide with disbelief as she took her first step. The thought made his chest tighten, not with sadness but with hope. The night deepened. Outside, the twin moons climbed high, but Jack didn't notice. He was lost in his work. His hands moved with rhythm. Each strike of the hammer, each spark from the welder became a beat, steady and relentless. At one point, the power cell sputtered, the glow flickering weakly. Jack cursed under his breath. Rushing to adjust the lines, the cell hummed back to life, glowing steady again. He sighed with relief, wiping the sweat from his forehead. For a moment, he sat down heavily on the stool, exhaustion pulling at his body, his eyes half closed. The workshop quiet now except for the faint buzz of energy. He stared at the frame, a strange feeling filling him. It was no longer just metal and wires, it was a promise. He thought of the cold stares in the market, the harsh words of her guardians, the whispers of waste and shame. His fists clenched. "They don't see her," he muttered. "But I do, and I'll prove them wrong." The girl, at that same hour, lay awake in her small bed, staring at the ceiling of her guardian's home. She could still hear their voices in her head, their disappointment, their pity, but louder than that. She remembered the human's voice in the market, strong, angry, and full of fire. For the first time, someone had spoken for her. She pressed her small hands together, whispering into the dark, "Please don't forget me." Back in the workshop, Jack stood again, lifting the frame carefully, testing its weight. He slipped it onto the floor, wires dragging softly. The legs wobbled but held, faint sparks lit the joints. Jack's lips curved into a tired smile. "It's working," he whispered, his heart racing. He knew this was only the beginning. There were adjustments to make, refinements to test. But the spark had been lit, the first sparks of something greater. Outside, the night winds howled through the colony, carrying whispers of dust and silence. But inside Jack's workshop, fire burned bright. A hidden fire that would soon change the life of a little girl who still believed she couldn't play ball. Asterisk. The next morning, the colony skies glowed pale orange as the twin suns climbed higher, streets filled with the quiet bustle of traders and workers. But Jack wasn't walking toward the market. He was heading in the opposite direction. His eyes, searching for one face, one girl. He found her sitting alone again, this time on a short wall outside the learning hall. Other children ran past, laughing, carrying books and toys, but she stayed behind. Her small hands folded on her lap, her leg brace catching the sunlight like a cruel reminder. Jack approached slowly, careful not to startle her. When his shadow fell over her, she looked up, eyes wide, uncertain. "You," she whispered softly, as if surprised he had come back. "Me," Jack replied with a small smile. He crouched down to her level. "I need your help with something." The girl blinked, confused. "My help? I can't even—" She paused, her voice trembling. "I can't play ball, sir." Jack shook his head gently. "This isn't about ball. Not yet. It's about testing something I've been building. And I think you're the only one who can help me." Her eyes flickered with doubt, then with curiosity. No one had ever asked her for help before. After a long silence, she nodded once. Very slowly, Jack stood, extending his hand. She hesitated before placing her small hand in his, her fingers trembling. He guided her carefully down the street, away from the busy roads, toward the old metal doors of his workshop. The moment he pushed the door open, she gasped. The air inside smelled of oil and smoke. Machines lined the walls. Scraps of metal lay piled in corners. The place looked alive, glowing faintly with the hum of power cells. Her eyes darted everywhere, wide with wonder and fear. "What is this place?" she whispered. "My workshop," Jack said proudly. "Where broken things get a second chance." She swallowed, looking down at her brace, her voice barely audible. "Even me?" Jack's heart tightened. He knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Especially you." He guided her toward the workbench where the mechanical frame stood waiting, its joints glowing faint blue, the small exo legs humming softly like a heartbeat. The girl froze, her breath catching in, her throat. What is that?" Jack smiled. "A gift if you're brave enough to try it. It's not finished, not perfect, but it's ready for a test run." She shook her head quickly, stepping back. "No, I'll break it. I always break things. I can't." Jack raised his hand gently, stopping her words. "It's not about breaking, it's about trying. Machines can be fixed, and so can people." He leaned closer, his eyes steady. "I believe you can do this, do you?" Her lip trembled. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. No one had ever asked her that before. Not once. Finally, she nodded faintly, whispering, "I'll try." Jack's smile widened. He carefully lifted the frame from the bench, setting it on the ground. It stood like a second set of legs, open at the top with space for her to step into, glowing softly with promise. He knelt, adjusting the straps. "All right, all you need to do is step inside. I'll take care of the rest." The girl's hands shook as she placed them on his shoulder for balance, slowly lifting her braced leg, slipping it into the glowing frame. Then the other. The metal adjusted with soft clicks, wrapping gently around her legs. Jack tightened the straps, his hands quick but careful. "Good. Very good," he said softly. "Now hold still." He pressed a switch on the side. The frame hummed louder. The blue glow brightened. The girl gasped, her eyes wide as the machine came alive. "I can feel it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's moving." Jack steadied her hands. "All right, little one, try." She hesitated, her heart pounding. Then, with trembling effort, she shifted her weight forward. The frame responded, its mechanical legs moving smoothly, lifting her body with strength her own legs never had. Her eyes widened, her lips parted in shock. She took a step, then another, her small frame wobbling but steady. I'm standing," she whispered, tears spilling freely now. "I'm really standing." Jack laughed softly, his chest tight with relief. "Yes, you are. Stronger than you know." She looked down at her feet, glowing with light, taking another, shaky step, then another, each one firmer than the last. Her laughter rang out, high and bright, filling the workshop with a sound Jack had never heard from her before. But the moment was broken by the sharp creak of the door. Jack turned quickly, his heart sinking. Two colony neighbors stood in the doorway, their faces pale with shock. "What is this?" one hissed. "You dare put her in a machine?" "This is madness," the other spat. "She is weak, you're playing with shame." The girl froze, her smile fading, fear rushing into her eyes. Jack stepped forward, his voice sharp and steady. "She's not weak, she's walking, can't you see? She's not broken." But the neighbors turned and ran, their footsteps echoing into the night, carrying whispers that would soon spread. Jack turned back to the girl, his voice low but firm. "Don't listen to them. Look at what you've done. Look at what you are." Her small chest rose and fell quickly, but her hands gripped the frame tighter. She lifted her chin, her voice shaking but proud. I can walk." And in that moment, despite the fear, despite the whispers waiting outside, Jack knew something had changed forever. The test run had worked, and the girl had taken her first steps into a new world. The suns rose slowly over the Yei colony the next day, washing the streets with pale gold light. Markets opened, traders called out their prices. Children spilled from their homes, laughing as they carried toys and balls. Yet whispers ran ahead of them like shadows. The whispers were about Jack's workshop, about the human mechanic and the crippled alien girl, about the glowing frame that let her stand. By morning, nearly every household had heard a version of the story. Some dismissed it as nonsense. Others murmured with disapproval. A few even showed curiosity, but none of them were kind. Inside the workshop, Jack tightened the last strap on, the girl's frame. His eyes steady, his hands gentle. She stood with her weight balanced between her natural brace and the glowing metal that hummed softly around her legs, her face pale with nervousness. "They're going to laugh," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're going to call me weak again." Jack crouched down so his eyes met hers, his voice low but firm. "Let them laugh. What matters is that you're standing, that you're stronger than yesterday." He gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "The first step is always the hardest, but it's also the most important." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Do you really think I can?" Jack smiled faintly. "I don't think. You just proved it yesterday. You can." The girl nodded slowly, her hands tightening on the frame, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Jack pushed open the heavy workshop door, the outside. Air rushed in, carrying the sound of children's laughter from the playground. The girl froze, her feet stuck to the floor, her chest rising and falling quickly. Jack stepped beside her, offering his hand. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "I'll be right here." She looked at him, then at the light outside. Finally, with trembling resolve, she placed her small hand in his and stepped forward. The frame whirred softly, adjusting to her weight. The ground felt strange beneath her feet, solid but new. Together they walked slowly through the narrow streets, Passers-by stopped to stare. Whispers followed them. "That's her," one voice hissed. "The broken one." Another muttered, "And the human always meddling." The girl's cheeks burned, her head lowered, but Jack squeezed her hand. "Keep walking," he whispered. "Don't look at them, look at your feet, look at what you're doing." Step by step they reached the edge of the playground, the same place where she had once sat alone, watching others play, the same place where she had whispered, "Sorry, sir, I can't play ball." Now the children paused mid-game, their ball bouncing away, their eyes wide as they saw her standing, her frame glowing faintly under the suns. One boy sneered, "She's cheating, that's not real walking." Another laughed, "Look, she's strapped to a machine, she's still broken." The girl flinched, her hands shaking, but Jack stepped forward, his voice steady. "Machines don't cheat, they help, same as a brace, same as a tool, and tools don't make you less, they make you more." The children fell silent, uncertain. The girl's eyes lifted slowly, her gaze trembling but determined. She looked at the ball lying near her feet. Jack saw the way she stared at it. His lips curved into a small smile. "Go on," he said softly, "one step at a time." Her heart pounded, sweat formed on her forehead, but she shifted forward, the frame humming with strength. She lifted her foot and nudged the ball gently. It rolled a short distance. Silence fell across the playground. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. She whispered in disbelief. "I did it." Jack's chest swelled. "Yes, you did." The children stared, unsure whether to laugh or cheer. But the girl didn't wait. She took another step, firmer this time, then another. The ball rolled further. She followed it, her laughter breaking free, clear and bright, for the first time she wasn't just standing. She was playing. The crowd that had gathered at the edges of the playground whispered louder, some in shock, others in anger. "This is against tradition," one elder muttered. "She was meant to be hidden, not displayed," another said, but others murmured differently. "She's walking," a voice said softly, almost with awe. "She's smiling," another whispered. "I've never seen her smile." The girl kicked the ball again, harder this time. It flew across the dusty ground. Children gasped. One even clapped before covering his mouth quickly. She turned back toward Jack, her face glowing, her eyes wet with tears. "I can play," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can really play." Jack nodded, pride filling his chest. "Told you so." But as joy filled the air, darker eyes watched from the edge. Her guardian stood among the crowd, their faces pale with fury, the woman's lips pressed tight, the man's jaw clenched. They turned sharply, disappearing into the streets. Jack noticed his smile fading. He knew this wasn't over. He knew the cold stares would return sharper than ever. But when he looked back at the girl, standing tall, her laughter ringing, he also knew nothing could take this moment away. The first step had been taken, the first wall broken, and though storms waited ahead, the girl had tasted something new, something she would never give back: hope. The playground was louder than usual that afternoon. Word had spread faster than fire in dry grass by the time the suns leaned low. A full circle of children and adults had gathered around the dusty field, every pair of eyes fixed on the same girl, the one who was never supposed to stand, never supposed to play. She stood in the center, her small body wrapped in the glowing frame Jack had built, the hum of its energy steady beneath the noise. She shifted nervously, her fingers twisting against the straps. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "It's a trick," someone muttered. "She'll fall," another predicted. "She doesn't belong here," said a voice colder than the rest. The edge of the crowd, her guardians stood stiff, their faces hard as stone. They had demanded she stop. They had told her this was shameful, but she hadn't listened. For the first time in her life, she hadn't obeyed their fear. Instead, she had walked onto the playground, guided by the mechanic who refused to let her believe she was broken. Jack stood close by, his arms folded, his eyes scanning the crowd. He could feel their stares like knives against his back, but he didn't move, didn't flinch. He only watched her, giving her a small nod. "You don't have to prove anything to them," he said quietly. just for her. But if you want to, this is your moment. The girl looked at him, her chest rising and falling quickly. Then her gaze shifted to the ball lying in the dust, sunlight catching its worn surface. She remembered all the times she had sat aside, whispering, "Sorry, sir. I can't play ball." The memory burned in her chest, her lips pressed together, her eyes narrowed with a determination she had never felt before. "I want to," she whispered back, her voice trembling but firm. Jack's smile returned. "Then play." The ball was tossed toward her, rolling across the ground. Children held their breath. The crowd leaned forward. She steadied herself, the frame buzzing as it supported her. Then she lifted her foot and kicked. The ball shot forward harder than anyone expected, dust rising as it flew across the field. Gasps broke through the silence. Even some of the children cheered before stopping themselves. Her eyes widened. Her lips curved into a smile that grew, until laughter burst out clear and alive. She ran, or something close to running, the frame carrying her as she chased after the ball, her laughter echoing against the colony walls. The children looked at one another, uncertain. Then one boy shouted, "Pass it to me." Another added, "Here." For the first time, they weren't ignoring her. They were calling to her, inviting her in. Her hands trembled as she steadied herself. Then she kicked the ball again, this time toward another child. It bounced off his chest and he laughed, passing it back. Soon the playground filled with shouts, kicks, and laughter, and she was part of it, not outside, not forgotten. Part of the game. The crowd murmured louder, some in awe, others in anger. "She's playing," one whispered. "This is against our ways," said another. "She shouldn't be allowed," muttered an elder. But none of their words mattered, not to her, because for the first time in her life she wasn't whispering apologies from the corner. She was running, laughing, and playing ball. Her guardians pushed through the crowd, their voices sharp. "Enough!" the man shouted. "You're bringing shame to us all." The girl froze, the ball at her feet. The crowd went silent, every eye fixed on the confrontation. Her hands trembled, her voice small. I just wanted to play." Before her guardians could answer, Jack stepped forward, his voice steady, but filled with fire. "She isn't shame, she isn't broken. She's stronger than all of you who tried to hide her. Stronger than your whispers, stronger than your stares." He pointed toward her. "Look at her. Look at what she's done. She's not the girl who can't. She's the girl who did." The silence broke, as children clapped, their voices rising. In cheers, one by one, even hesitant adults began to murmur in agreement. Her guardians faltered, their anger dimmed beneath the weight of the crowd's shifting eyes. The girl looked down at the ball, then back at Jack, her tears shining, but this time they weren't of sorrow, they were of triumph. She whispered, barely audible but strong, "Sorry, sir, I can play ball?" And with a final kick, the ball soared high into the air. The playground erupted with cheers, the sound rolling across the colony like thunder. Jack stood quietly, a small smile on his face, his heart lighter than it had been. In years he had built many machines in his life, but none like this. None that carried hope so brightly. The game had begun, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't. And as the suns dipped lower, painting the colony in gold, the mechanic and the alien girl stood together, their shadows long, their bond unbroken. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't fixing a machine. It's proving a broken world wrong. One step, one laugh, one ball at a time.